Such a pleasure to have you back. I enjoyed our conversation in my closet last time on the podcast. And
remember.
yeah, at the beginning of the pandemic, was it? Or a few months
Yeah,
in?
it was actually at the beginning of the pandemic. So here we are,
Full
2
circle?
years later.
Well, yeah, I'd like to think it was done, but apparently it's not done yet.
Yeah.
So I am so glad you're here, because I think the content of what you're sharing is applicable to, regular life, but it certainly is in the last couple of years. And there are some really significant moments in our lives, whether we're aware of them all the time or not, but are traumatic moments. And what you're offering enables families to approach dealing with trauma and dealing with really challenging stuff in their homes or in their lives in a way that is kind of unconventional. And I would love to hear what your approach is, but would you introduce yourself and share a little bit about who you are?
Sure. Thank you so much. I'm grateful to be here. My name is Nicolle Nattrass, and just want to acknowledge the First Nations community on whose lands I live on. So I want to express my gratitude to this Nanawas First Nation. And I am a mom, first and foremost, and trained as an addiction counselor and creative journaling. I have 5 creative journaling programs that I created. I've been really blessed to have had a pretty exciting theater career as an actor, playwright, instructor, and dramaturg, which is a weird word. So I do many things, and I guess like my backdrop here of color, like color is really important to me. Variety is really important to me. And I think, like you said, in the last couple of years, certainly families, we've been taking on more stress.
Yeah.
I'm a homeschooling mom as well. So, and I was a homeschooling mom before COVID, but when COVID hit, I had a lot of compassion for for people who had never, say, done homeschooling before, and then all of a sudden they were in this position. And also, even though that we had done homeschooling, it was still stressful because, we do a lot of socializing activities and everything was shut down. And so that's when I just got the idea of like, well, you have to write something. You've got to release a chapter. You've got to write a book. And I always had this idea for a book based on my work with clients in a treatment center on using journaling to process stress, anxiety, trauma, but also the positive things, like to boost, not that stress, anxiety, and trauma aren't positive, but to boost things in our lives. And so I think journaling, we go to it with everything. There's been times when I've gone to journaling with my son when we lost our little kitten and he was gone for the whole day, and my son was just devastated, and we kept going back to the page and journaling. So I really think it's the perfect container, outlet, and window that we have at our disposal. And so I wrote a chapter, I released it, I think it was May. We're in a time loop now, in early COVID, so that I could release it for moms to have and for people to be able to have. And then I talked to a publisher who said, well, you got to write the book. And so look,
yay.
And I did it, published it as a digital copy as well, because I want it to be available for moms to like download it right away if they want to. But I also really wanted a hard copy. You can see there's like journal examples in the book of how to use it. Yeah, it's, when I think about what's going on right now in the world, like in Canada alone, 28,000 kids are waiting just in the province of Ontario alone for mental health help.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't propose that creative journaling is a substitute at all for professional help or art therapy or counseling or play therapy. But we as parents and caregivers need tools.
We need an outlet. Exactly.
Right. And so I feel really passionate about that. And, and also that it's not exclusive, that, everybody can grab the crayons in their house and stickers, and paper. You know, you may not have a big journal, but you know, you can get a journal and start, right?
Right. Everybody has crayons in their house. They're under the cushions. If you don't know where they are
That's
in
right.
your
Or
sofa.
pencil crayons, but not a good sharpener, right? You have
Right,
about
exactly.
six pencil sharpeners in the house, but not a one that works.
Yeah, it's time to learn how to whittle. Yes, a therapy all in itself. You know, I got
I
to
have
tell
to show,
you,
yeah,
I
I
have
gotta
to,
just show you this
that's yours.
about creative journaling for self-care, is that there are no rules, there are no journal police. And, you know, if you look at this, you think like, what the heck is this? But this was a day where my son was having a particularly tough day, and we decided we would take sparkles, and he was mad. He was 4 when we started, and he was mad because all the sparkles kept falling off the page. So we decided we'd tape the sparkles in the book,
Smart.
which was kind of an interesting exercise, right? And he was like, huh, again, just something that we did together to connect, to build that attachment, to communicate,
Right.
right?
You know, I'll tell you that as a child, it was my saving grace as well. I started journaling when I was 7, and I did live in an environment that was highly contentious, and I'm being generous there. And that was my saving grace. I wrote my entire childhood through up to my adulthood, and it's helped me process a lot of trauma. I didn't know it was a tool. It was just my outlet. You have a
Yeah,
story around trauma in your own family. Are you interested in sharing a little bit about that? And if you don't want to,
sure.
you can.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate you sharing that. And I know that, like, you know, scientific research now shows that that writing about those stressful events that we go through in our lives can reduce our stress. It strengthens immune cells, like all
Yeah,
these things now that are being proven, um, right now that we know. But before, it was just like these little cute little journals, right? These cute little lock and key 5-year personal
that was
diaries.
my very first journal.
Yeah, really, eh?
Yes, it was. It was green and it had a lock, and I felt really special. It was the first thing I ever bought with my money, with
Oh,
an allowance.
sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like the pages were so small, you only had like a little bit to write and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I
Super
wrote, I
fun.
woke up, I made my bed, I brushed my teeth. I wrote that for so many years that to this day, I haven't memorized. It's
That's
true.
amazing.
Yes, it was, yeah, powerful stuff for a narrative someday. But it
Wow,
really
hey?
was. I think it helped save my,
Yeah,
it gave me peace. It gave me a place to feel like I was separate and I was supported.
yeah. And
Yeah,
like that's the piece of, like, whenever we land on the page, whether it's a doodle or we're writing something, it says I matter, my feelings matter, my thoughts matter, what's going on for me matters. And so, you know, the piece is when we started this work together, my son and I, without saying a word, that's what I'm saying to my son. When we sat down at the table, I'm saying what he's doing matters and what I'm doing matters.
right.
Right, it's just taking that time. And we started this process because like you, I was an avid journaler too. And
Mhm.
from working frontline as an addiction counselor, running groups, I saw how powerful journaling was for the women that I was working with and who were suffering addiction and trauma. And then when our family had a really terrible motor vehicle accident,
Yeah,
when my son was 4, I started to notice his behavior. There was a lot of behavior happening where it was clearly, because I've been trained in PTSD, and I started to notice what was going on for him. And as a parent looking around for resources in the community, what do you do with a 4-year-old? You know, we're
yeah,
not, and at that time I'd never experienced play therapy, but you know, certainly you're not going to send your child to a psychiatrist, you know,
right.
at 4 years old. And yet I could sense that we needed something in our family. And I reached out to a play therapist. Thankfully, there was someone down the road from us, but otherwise there was no options for us because we couldn't actually get back in the car. The
Right.
car was where it all happened. And so, you know, on a particularly bad day as a parent where I just was like, trying to take care of my husband, trying to take care of myself, and trying to take care of my son who now couldn't go to public school. because of the sound triggers and all kinds of stuff, nightmares, etc. I sat down with my journal, because that's what I've always done. That's my go-to, with my big journal, 8x10. And I just started, drawing or doodling. And he came up to me and, we started this kind of thing that we did over, I would say, pretty regularly for 5-6 years. And that journal, would travel with us. And within 3 months, he was sitting there drawing out the accident, like with no prompting from me whatsoever. And
so young.
He knew exactly what it was. This is this. He would tell me, this is this, this is this. And, I talked to the play therapist about it, and she's like, yeah, there was no pressure. There's no teaching. There's no, now it's time to do your journal. It was just whenever we felt like it,
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
For those that are, that have kids, sometimes it's hard for us to identify that something is a trauma reaction, because, at 4, probably you're not doing the cliche terrible twos. I think we probably changed that word, and I don't know.
Yeah.
But that 2 phase, I
Yeah.
had a child who didn't do that until she was just after 3. But 4 wouldn't typically be at that stage, but you could think that that wasn't trauma-based. And the same thing with a teenage child, whether they're individuating at 11 or 16, they go into a phase where they are just more reactive. So how can you tell whether that's a trauma-based thing or whether that's, developmental?
Yeah. Well, comparing the before and after to the event, and that's, so number one. Number two, I had a really great mom friend of mine from South Africa, gorgeous woman, Antoinette, who sent me this link, as moms do, developmentally, like to look at the age of the development and what's going on for them. So I would always kind of check in, like, oh, okay, that's why he's doing that. Or, if you have a typical diverse child, so I would look at that. And then the other piece for me was comparing what his behavior was before the car accident. Sleep was a big one. So, a lot of nightmares, not being able to sleep, more irritable. In our specific situation, it was really obvious in that all of a sudden, if anything, if you would, kids would play with blocks, right? And we'd have so much fun with those colored blocks and just remember those good days, right? Yeah. But all of a sudden he started, we would do normal play, and he would, if anything broke, it would be like the reaction was heightened. Right. So it wasn't like a normal 4-year-old who, of course, 4-year-olds can get really, really upset, right? It was like beyond that. Right. And one particular day, he actually built a whole bunch of little towers right by the front door. And literally we couldn't open the front door without them falling. And that's when I started to see the level of upset that would happen when he would see things destroyed. And, when the car accident happened, the other piece is that, it was a secondhand car that came with a name. It was one of those where the owner called the car Ursula after his wife. And so my son knew the car's name. And when the car accident happened, he saw the car destroyed in front of his eyes. Oh, right. So it was, he was screaming that name. And that's when I clued in, like, all these things that are being built, like kids show us through play, and it wasn't until I got into play therapy with an amazing doctor out here where we did it as a family. So we were all involved. It wasn't like dropping your child off. And he would act out all kinds of stuff that he had experienced because, and I think this answers the trauma question, is that when we go through a trauma, like even though all 3 of us were in the car, all 3 of us had a different traumatic experience. Right. Yes. So I think sometimes as parents, like we want to be like, we're all together and we got through it and everything's fine, which is true on the one hand. But on the other hand, what actually happened for us is that we were all separated, fractured. Right. My husband had his own experience. Our own experience of it is not necessarily the same as someone else's, just based on this is how we came into the world. We experience things differently.
and
Yeah.
that itself. But I'd like to hear you say, or continue sharing that story.
Well, I just think it's also about like trusting your instincts as a parent, right? Like we know when something's wrong, and like a couple of days right after the accident, I think the next day, you know, I would run into people and they would say things like, well, our family doctor, God bless him, he said, well, just try not to talk about the accident. And I was like, okay, like people tell you things and you're like, okay, well, I'll try not to talk about the accident. But my son was talking about the accident, or I ran into a stranger at the hospital, an old man, like in his 80s or whatever. And I was talking to him in the lobby and he said, oh, I will never forget it. I was in a car accident when I was 5 years old. And when I go through that intersection still, I will blah, blah, blah. And I just was like, huh. And so like gathering those little clues for myself as a parent and having training in PTSD, I started to think like there's something that we need here. And so, we did that. And the amazing thing that came out of it was that, years later, of course, he's 12 now and he's like so not into journaling with me.
Yeah,
But
I have a 13-year-old son, so I know what you mean. He will not let me see it if he does it.
Exactly. It's like, oh God, mom, right? But he can go through, like with the book, he went through all the journals and he had stacks and stacks of journals. And I'd say to him, do you want to get another journal? Yeah. So he would go and pick out the journal, but he can go through page by page and he can say, this is what I was talking about here. This is when I did the car and remember mom in the car accident, how we picked glass out of my ear.
No.
Right? Like so I think we have to be very
There's
careful.
a balance there. I've learned, I want to say a little about trauma, but it's not true. I've spent a lot of time in my life learning about trauma and how people, their methodologies. So the one thing that I've learned is they suggest not discussing it if it's going to be triggering for someone and that it's triggering. But the tricky thing is with a child, like you're saying, it's just like it's bursting forward. And what do you do with it?
And at that time, it would have been wrong to shut it down. But I know what you mean. It's a delicate balance because, over the years, it's been, several years since 2013, it happened in September. And so, over the years, he can have a story about it and we'll often talk about it. We'll drive through the intersection now and oftentimes, he'll be like, remember when we had the car accident? I went, yeah, we did have the car accident here and we're doing really well right now. Or, we have the opportunity to talk through it. And like, you were really brave that day and, we're doing really well. And so reframing even the whole school triggers and the sound triggers. And, the bottom line is my son was a very sensitive, artistic soul when this happened. And so when this happened, he just became more sensitive.
Right.
And sometimes with that comes anxiety, but oftentimes, as I said, we kind of have to ask, like, is it the chicken before the egg?
So tricky. The chicken. I identify with that too, because of the 3 siblings I had, I was known to be sensitive. And scratch that, I still am. And it's true, I am in a certain way, but at the same time, it compelled me to deal with stuff because it felt too much, too overwhelming. And that only enabled me to lay it out there, actually deal with it, and recognize that I had to go through certain processes or I had to use certain tools or resources, whatever, and I had to do it. And so I actually learned some of those things. And I have one sibling that has as well, and I have one sibling that didn't. And the one sibling that did not strike you as sensitive way back then, but she doesn't have the tools to address the things now. So that's kind of vulnerable, and I'm opening. I don't really want to be quite public about that because that's, my sibling, but how we show up in life does influence how we receive stuff, but
for sure,
it also can compel us to actually deal with it. And beautifully, you were able to do that alongside your son.
Yeah. And I also think like anxiety gets a bad rap because it's uncomfortable. And so I like to remind people of like there are positive attributes to anxiety. People who are more anxious tend to be highly sensitive. We tend to be pay more attention to detail, which
Yes.
we need folks to pay more attention to
Yeah.
detail. They're more in tune with how other people are feeling. They have
Yes.
more empathy and all these things, right? All these characteristics. So I think it's important to remind ourselves of all the positives too, right?
Yeah,
Lots
there
of
are.
positives.
Yeah. Had we talked about Enneagram once upon a time?
Yes, we did.
You're
What
a
are
4,
you?
right?
No, I'm a 6.
You're a 6.
I'm
Okay.
a 6.
I have you as the highly creative 4.
Are you a 4?
No, I'm a 2.
You're a 2.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I love playing those little games.
Yeah, me too. No, I'm a total 6. I'm the 6. The one characteristic of the 6 is you have a great success, and the 6s have an amnesia of success.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's like I'll do something really well and then have to do it 2 weeks later, and I'll be freaking out. My husband will be like, "You just did it 2 weeks ago and it went really well." I did.
Oh, but if I look at your bio, I mean, I literally don't know any homeschool mom that's also an actress, or frankly, and you don't say actress either, do you? I'm getting
No,
old.
we say
I'm
actor.
not,
That's okay.
I'm not with all the terminology, but I don't know any homeschool mom that's an actor or has your CV. Like it's really very interesting. So it's
Thank you.
interesting that you have amnesia, because then you just keep doing all these cool things.
I do. That's the thing. It's crazy. I know. And I look at my CV sometimes and I go, "Oh, did I do that?" And I mean, as far as acting goes, I'm really limit myself to certain projects.
Yeah.
Because it's just it's too much. It's too much to do as a homeschool mom, it. And I'm lucky that my husband and I share the homeschooling, because
Yeah.
it's so much some days.
Right. Yes. And is it maybe because of the pandemic, or it just is as well outside of it?
I think it's because we're both self-employed. So, it's a juggle, right? And
Yes.
what I think the pandemic has done really well is that finally, like, why should we not show that we have kids at home? Like, we're everybody's in the same boat. And I really appreciate that also, because certainly in theater, as an actor, like as a new mom, I couldn't work for a long time because there's no concessions made. It was like you had to pretend, well, I'm not breastfeeding, I don't have a child, and I think we really need to change that idea and, let moms and dads and be more flexible and go, this is actually a really important part of my life here. Right? The more we do that, the more employers see that, I think is a good thing, rather than having to hide it away, like, oh, pretend I don't have kids, so you don't have to worry about me getting days off, or I'm going to be, my kids are going to be sick.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to bring us back to your book, or your journaling workbook. You specifically say it's a key recovery tool to help children connect and process stress, anxiety, and trauma. And I really love how you say a soft place to land, and when words are not enough. I really love that, because there's a lot of people, I've learned this in coaching homeschool parents, that I instinctively think journaling is really useful for you, or talk therapy is really useful for you. But and that might be Enneagram, it might be personality profiling differences, but we don't all want to process trauma or anxiety the same way. Journaling is super powerful for me. But how would you interact with the discussion on anxiety then? We kind of touched a little bit on anxiety. How do you use journaling to address anxiety?
Well, that's a tricky one, because it's like journaling for those detailed oriented folks can get into perfectionism, right? And then that perfectionism, or I make a mistake on the page, and then that's anxiety provoking. So it's like feeding it, not wanting to feed the anxiety, wanting to fan the anxiety. And I guess the way I do it is, if it doesn't feel good, we don't do it.
Right.
Like if it doesn't feel good, then let's move on to the next thing, or let's come back to that. But I think there's a real opportunity, certainly with anxiety, to use pencil, to talk about what it's like to make mistakes. The other thing that I want to say too is that I don't think we have to write. A lot of kids, might have school-based trauma, right? From
Right.
writing. Gosh, I know for years I struggled to be the perfect handwriter because I was told that I was a backhand writer. Do you remember that? Where they'd be
Don't
like,
remember
oh,
that
you're a
one.
backhand writer. And I'd be like,
Okay.
I remember being so upset by that, right? So
I remember
this
not
idea,
writing my eyes correctly, and it wasn't enough of a slant.
that's right. It's like,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
again, we go with this no rules, like enjoyment. There are no
Right.
rules. There are no journal police saying like you have to write everything that you did today and it's got to be done. It's like, well, what do you want to play with? Do you like color? Do you like stickers? You know, the other piece that I'm working with communities that have literacy issues.
Mm,
So I heard this beautiful thing that I loved the other day about journaling is listening.
yes. And
So
listening
however
to
you
yourself
listen,
sometime. Yeah.
like listen to a piece of music,
Right.
take some colors, you know, like this. I love doing stuff like this where it's just like,
A
it's just
collage.
stickers.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, it's like, what does it have to be? You know, it can be nothing. Soft place to land, you
Oh,
know. It's really, you know, the other piece is like anxiety can be like, we can use symbols on the page. We can put our problems down on the page and then turn the page and leave it there. We
you
can
know, when
dump
you
on the
said
page.
listening, it
Mhm.
actually reminds me that one of the reasons I've always used journaling is almost like a form of mindfulness, of really just going inside and what am I feeling? And
Mhm.
I didn't do the hand on heart, feel what's inside my mind or my head or my hands or my heart or my, you know, the palms of my hands or the sole of my feet. I didn't necessarily go through a process, but it
Yeah.
was sort of like, okay, what's going on with me? And I'm writing it on the page and
Mhm.
I'm listening to myself.
Mhm.
And there's some
It
sort of
is
like,
really listening,
yeah, there's
you
some sort
know,
of weird
and
connection to that.
there, like if some people use it for meditation, you know, the other thing that folks are using it who don't want to write, which is totally fine. A big thing, like you don't have to write is, you know, they do recordings,
Right.
right, which is a great option as well. The other thing about journaling is that I've heard it said from the International Association for Journal Writing, it's her word, which I love it, is journaling is about self-intimacy. It's
Yes,
about into me,
exactly. That's that. Yeah.
right? And so there's times when we don't want to journal and we shouldn't journal. There's times when actually, if intimacy is too painful, like I think I didn't write about the car accident. I didn't actually write about it in my journal. I think doing this kind of thing, I remember saying to my counselor when I was unpacking the car accident, I said, I just don't feel like I can write about it. And she said, well, then I guess maybe you're going to get an art journal and you're just going to start like, you know, again, this is toothpicks. These are toothpicks
That is
where we
very
just
creative.
like we
Yes.
just got glue one day and we thought, I'm bored. How do you glue toothpicks on the page? Can we do that? Well, let's try it. Like, again, this letting go of perfection. What's on the page?
Right.
Letting go of it. You know, and oftentimes it would lead to these great discussions. Well, what are you drawing, Mom? Well, this is what I felt like when I was disappointed that day.
Mm. Is that crayons or is that watercolors?
It's like paint.
Oh,
Yeah. You know, and now they have such like funky paints of like
yeah.
sparkles in your paint and,
Yeah.
you know, even taking water on the page or, you know, I mean, we're veering more into art therapy, which I veer more into, but even clay, right? With someone with anxiety, clay of just like,
So what is that? It's like a tactile thing. We connect with the tactility or the feel.
yeah, I mean, as part of our senses, right? Like, you know, the other piece with color is just even playing with color every day. Color has a profound impact on our brain. We're still studying, but it has a fundamental aspect of our human perception. We know that certain colors elicit certain feelings. So with anxiety, I think color is an important one too.
Yeah, that is why my house is blue.
I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's the whole clutter thing too, right? Have you heard about that? The clutter. clutter can create anxiety. And I know for me, that is so true. Like at a certain point, I'm just like, no more clutter.
So when you said you showed your page and said, okay, this is dealing with perfectionism, I
Yeah.
actually thought all you have to do is figure out how to handle the dishes on the counter or an
Yeah.
overflowing garbage basket or something. It can be tricky.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. For sure. You know, yeah, it's important, right? Our environment, right? What's around us is key for sure.
It definitely influences. So I'm curious where you came up with the idea of a soft place for tender hearts to land. What does that mean?
It kind of, for me, it's connected to being trauma informed because it's going to make me cry, but I think that there's very few places in the world where we can be tender.
Right.
And I wish tender was cool.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
I'm still waiting for the day when tender is like the it thing. Because I think we're born into this world with tenderness. And I think it's something for me as an artist, certainly in theater, you know, kind of a competitive career, it's something that I held on to and I guarded vigilantly, was my tenderness around my heart. And so when we come to the page, it's having that soft place to land, that we can be tender. And for me in this book, it's about the parents and the caregivers having that reaction instead of jumping in and standing over to dictate, this is pretty, this is not, this is this is this. This is not what this work is. It's about what's tender.
Right.
And sometimes tender is scribbles on the page. And, you know, I'm a big believer that we don't need to move our kids forward all the time.
Yeah.
We just need to be that place for them to, I'm doing this, you're doing this. That's it. Let's put the book away.
You sound like a seasoned homeschool mom.
I've certainly, I have my days. You know, the biggest thing for me as a homeschool mom is fighting with video games, right? I mean,
right. Okay. Yeah.
competing with video games.
So are they actually video games? Like, is that, are you meaning
yeah.
on an iPad or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or just the online, you know,
Yeah.
during COVID for us, we were, you know, kind of very strict about video games.
Yeah.
And then of course, when COVID happened, we had to get an iPad. We had to,
yeah, Apple
you know,
did well. I didn't think about that. Yeah.
get on Kids Messenger because literally there was no, as an only child, there's nobody around. So dealing with that whole thing, and you know, I have a friend who works with youth in gambling and video games. I mean, it's a real deal, right? Especially with boys, it's a real deal.
It's too easy, and we've been there actually, and just tapping that button, except that we end up seeing those charges, so it becomes a discussion point. But I'm with you on the screen time challenge. Even my son is right now practicing, he wants to be on the screen all the time, and which is absolutely an issue for me. The irony is that he's training to be a grandmaster in chess. Okay, so you're like, wait, so how do I do this then? Do I limit the screen time even though he wants to be competitive in chess at 13? And my instinct is still yes, but he's had more time. But actually, you know, you're an addictions counselor, so can you speak to that about screen use and what it does with your brain? Because there's a huge discussion about screen use and controversy in the homeschool community.
There is, and I'm not specific to that. Like my friend is like a real expert on, she actually took my courses in order to use my courses with her clients who are clearly addicted to video game screen time. I mean, it is addictive. Screen time is addictive. Facebook is addictive. You know, of course, the video games are hitting that part of the brain, which is that pleasure center, which makes me feel like I've accomplished something, right? Like I've accomplishing all these things, and it's that same dopamine, I think.
Again, I think you're right. It's dopamine.
I'm not a video game addiction specialist, but I think for me, it's like when it becomes harmful to people around you, and when it becomes harmful to the child. And, you know, For me, it's about balance. It's like I say to my son, like, okay, life is about balance. So we have actually been over here in this kind of COVID time, way more screen time than I've wanted.
Right. Said
Way
everybody.
more, right? Everybody. And now it's like, okay, what else are we doing? Okay, we're going to go to boxing. We're going to go to gymnastics. We got to go for our walks. You know, we got to keep our mental health up. Like it's like, what else? The way I deal with it is, what else are we doing?
Right.
Because I always say to him, the other thing is that I say, like, I'm not changing my plans so that you can come home and be on video games.
Right.
You know, yes, we have a schedule, and within the schedule, like in the summertime, I'm not going to run home at 1 o'clock because you have 2 hours. You're allowed 2 hours from 1
Right.
to whatever. You're
Yeah.
going to have to adjust.
So that's the same way I approach nutrition. Is I'm not going to not eat. I don't know, what do I really like? Chocolate. Okay, that's too easy. But I'm not going to not eat chocolate in a day, but I am going to say, but how much, you know, how many vegetables or how many fruits or whatever other things am I also eating? So it sounds like you're doing the same thing with screens.
Yeah, it's kind of a balance, right? Because
Yeah.
if there's nothing else, it's like if you eat pizza every day of the week, you know, at the end of the week, you got a kid who is super pale, and it's like, we need some greens, or, you know, like that kind of thing, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's part of the emotional load, invisible load of motherhood, you know, of parenthood,
Yeah.
is where we're kind of like always calculating those things.
Yeah.
But
But we're never
certainly,
satisfied. There's also a not ever satisfied, right? Because they're on a screen. You're like, go outside. They're outside. You're like, hey, read a book. You know, it's always one thing.
yeah. And you know, there's lots of arguments, and it's like, I'm okay with being I'm okay with the arguments. I'm also okay with pushing a little bit more for concentration and focus, because I think our kids are losing the
Well, I
ability
love that. I love that you're
focus and
saying
concentrate.
both those things. Those are really good because it's kind of countercultural right now.
It is,
Yeah.
right?
And yet,
And it's
yeah, go
like,
ahead.
no, you can be bored, and I know you hate it, and you think your life is over, and you'll scream, literally scream,
Yeah, sorry
right?
about
But
that.
it's like,
I'm giggling out of awareness. Like, yay,
right? It's
someone
like,
gets me.
and
Yeah.
we need other things, and you're gonna have to handle it. You're gonna have to deal with it. And this is
Yes.
about concentration and focus. I can concentrate. Well, no, you can't.
Yeah.
Right? Everything is like immediate. The other thing that I will say is that we have this rule about, you know, he's got a job now. We've got this rule about what you can spend your money on. And it's like, certain things have to be real. Like, it has to be real. I have to be able to touch it. I've got to be able to see it. You know, if you
Instead of
want to
tokens
spend,
on a game, is that
yeah,
what
if you want to spend money on a new outfit on your game, sure.
Oh, okay.
But there's going to be a certain amount of money that you're
Yes.
putting aside every month that you can't spend $120 on anything that's not real in real life. Right.
Yeah, I
Sorry.
totally get that. And I could share stories that I won't, because I have to limit all the stories that I share about my children. They're mostly
Yes.
teenagers now. But
Yes.
you know, when you're talking about screens, actually, that is a huge impact on anxiety as well. Now, it could be a huge impact on mom's anxiety, because she feels this like, how do I control this? My child wants it. They cause so much conflict. And it could be on the child's experience. Well, they don't notice it, I think, but I do notice if the kids have too many, you know, or too much time with screens, they really are more antsy.
Yeah.
So,
No.
so what's your experience with that?
Yeah, I agree. There's just so much of a difference, right? So much of a difference of what kids are like on screen versus off screen. Central nervous system, right? It's jacked up, it's activated. Yep.
So
Lots of
I want
conflicts.
Carla, and Carla, if you have any questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat.
Yeah.
And I would also love to hear what you offer for your courses. So I guess it was almost 2 years ago, I was talking with you about your almost released book, or your journal. And then that has turned into a whole bunch of courses. So tell me more.
Yeah, so kind of with this book, I'm doing creative journaling for family self-care. So I'm doing a 90-minute webinar, exactly what we're talking about, which is great, on how to actually start using the journaling with your family. And I have a creative self-care for moms course that's an e-course designed by me, busy mom, which kind of lands in your inbox. And
I
also, of
should
course,
take it.
yeah, you might like it, you know.
Yeah, I'm sure I
I
would.
haven't done it as a webinar yet, but I can. All of these things are, you know, now pivoting online. And creative journaling self-care for helping professionals. So working with counselors, nurses, doctors, anybody, teachers who are in the helping professional who, you know, maybe they want to try journaling for their own stress. Maybe they are recommending journaling to clients. You know, we have journaling continues to be the #1 recommendation. It's the #1 education tool, the #1 strategy tool. And yet there are many people, if they've never journaled, they're just recommending it to everybody. So in that course, I kind of talk about like how to really recommend it in a trauma-informed, guided way, right? Because there are times when we shouldn't be journaling, when that can trigger grief and upset and more trauma and right.
In this time, there is so much mental health issues, or so many issues, and so many different dynamics. You know, I happen to be in a region where there is not enough mental health resources available for people. So what's been your experience then? I know that you're not doing addictions counseling right now, but what's your experience with that?
Well, my experience with that actually is I'm very, very excited to share that I launched my program, the 6-module program, Creative Journaling, the Promises of Recovery, at a treatment center in Florida, at an outpatient clinic. And so I'm looking at launching it into different centers with different populations. And the big piece is really working with populations that are not only dealing with mental health, but kind of dealing with cognitive impairment due to substance abuse or lifestyle, due to the substance abuse, economic factors, etc. So my work is really about making it accessible, right? So I adapt the program to the client. And I think the bottom line is, you know, if you have a guided program and you're dealing with a really hard mental health situation, having a guided program is way better than just kind of starting on your own and not having any support. You know,
that is so true. There is something to be said. You know, on one hand, I think, oh, I don't know, I could do that on my own. And it's true, we can do whatever on our own, but there's a sense of accountability. And in my experience with coaching and in my practice, I'm continuing to be in an education program for coaching. I'm learning that it's really asking the right questions, really listening fully, and helping that person right there be able to unwrap or uncover the question or the answers that are actually inside of them. And that can be done, but it's really hard to do that when it's you on your own, because you don't see your own blind spots.
Well, that's the whole piece. And like the piece about my courses is that even the e-courses, I always offer 30-minute coaching because, and you wouldn't believe how many people don't.
Yes, I would believe.
Don't take it.
Yes.
But what's been really cool during COVID is I've had people all over the world, you know, having a 30-minute session just to check in and find out how they're doing. And, you know,
yeah, no, I do believe it, but there is something very accountable. Maybe it's the level of commitment that people have at times to themselves, that they say, well, I'm okay. And I've been there, but you go to the other side, you have those therapy sessions, or you have a coaching session, or you have whatever. And after a while, you're like, oh yeah, no, this is great. This is just as useful as me drinking a green smoothie in the morning. It just like hyper enables you to deal with the stuff that's right in front of you in your life. Instead of just kind of rolling with the stuff that's mucky and keeping you slow and kind of unhappy.
Yeah, and we can't see our blind spots. You're right.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I want to hear, before we close, I want to hear about what social stories are. I'm curious what you mean by that.
Well, I was doing social stories before I knew what social stories were. And that's funny because it's kind of what I was doing with my son. You know, he had a hard time dealing with transitions. So transitioning to the dentist, transitioning to school, schedules changing, any kind of transition. And so what I used to do was mark it in the journal and kind of talk through it and draw it out. So we're at the dentist, we're on our way to the dentist today. And we draw kind of, the dentist building, right? Kind of draw it out, do you know the kind of chair? Why don't you draw the kind of chair? I don't want to draw the chair. Okay, I'll draw the chair, right? To kind of talk through, and then remember, Tony's going to come in, he's going to talk to you. And like what usually happens is they put that mask on. I don't like that mask. Yeah. So the mask is going to be there. And like drawing it out on the page is kind of like front loading, right? It's like front loading the experience before it happens. One of the examples in the book is going to a camp for the first time, a summer camp.
Right.
So talking about like, so remember yesterday, because I would have to do this, I'd have to walk to the camp building the day before, right? In order to alleviate the anxiety. It's like, okay, so remember that building we were at yesterday? Yeah. Okay. So I'm pretty sure it's on the second floor. It's going to be in a classroom, like a classroom, like let's draw it out. So that kind of thing is I was told is a social story from a really lovely education assistant. And she used it all the time. And it's really, really helpful because again, we can front load that experience. I don't know if you found this, but with anxiety, sometimes you can front load the experience and it increases the anxiety.
Yes.
Like over the top, or but if you don't front load the experience, the anxiety is there. So you're kind of always having to figure out like, which one should I do here?
Absolutely. I'm going to tell you a story that will sound like I am a very incompetent parent.
That's okay. I can totally relate.
Well, so my husband and I decided that we would go to rural Africa and, volunteer in a hospital. And it was so meaningful on so many different levels. And we really shared resources essentially for probably a total of 4 or 5 months in 2 different times. But the second time was in West Africa. And they had an Ebola outbreak. So maybe 9 months before we left. And we were like, should we go? Should we not go? Because we were doing it for our 4 homeschooled kids. Yeah. And so front loading that discussion did not turn out to be a beneficial thing for my oldest daughter. And we did end up going. And we were reassured that we weren't in any threat. But then when we were on the ground, we discovered we were under threat. We never did see Ebola, but now, what do you think? That's kind of risky, isn't it? And I absolutely know what it's like to front load a child and say, maybe we shouldn't have engaged the discussion like that with our child first. But more often than not, it's reversed. Yeah,
it is more often than not. And it's one of those frustrating things as a parent. It's like, as soon as you know it, the second you should have done it or not, right? Yes. And you can't take it back, right?
It back up. Yeah,
you can't. It's like, okay, but it's tricky that way. Transitions they're tricky that way.
Yeah, they are. But that's a really good point, though, that you make, that actually oftentimes it's a better thing, especially for parenting. And so that just means my family would be listening to our discussion and be saying, so that's what we need to do with you to make sure you get out of the house on time to go to dental appointments, is to actually front load me so we can get ready for something.
Like, but that's a good point. Like you could, dentists are a huge stressor.
Yes.
Dentists or doctors, you could give yourself 15 minutes, sit down at the page and write like, what's really going on for me right now? I hate the dentist. Right. I hate the dentist. But actually I hate the dentist, blah, 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 blah. Like, let yourself dump about it. Okay, Nicolle, because I do this inspired self-dialogue with myself where I'll be like, I'll just let that part of me write everything. And then I'll be like, okay, Nicolle, it's like I'm being my own loving parent. Okay, Nicolle, right, exactly. We know that this is going on. We know it's true. We know you hate this. I get it. I get it. I get it. I get it. You had braces. This is all kinds of old memories. Go through this whole thing, right? no matter, and pick a word. Okay, what can I do? I put it on the page. Does it help? I don't know. I
It
get it
does
out.
help. I do
I
this in
go to
front
the
of the mirror.
dentist. I tell my dentist, hi, Tony. Tony, remember me? I'm the one who cries in the dentist chair. No matter what you say, I'm just going to be crying in the dentist chair. And he's always like, oh, you always cry. Oh, that's too bad. What have I done wrong? Nothing, Tony. It's just me. I'm just a crier in the dentist chair.
Yes, I love that. That is so good.
Blubber, like at some point, like,
Please don't take that machine that makes that noise. And if you do use it, do I have to spend $6,000 on it?
and then I leave. I'm always like super happy to leave. Like, bye.
Yes,
Never
exactly.
see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. What would be your number one tip to anyone who's trying to heal or help someone else heal from their trauma? One tip. You have to distill that in one tip. That's tricky.
Okay. I'm totally going to go for the joy factor. And
Okay.
I would say, find one thing with your senses that you like, a smell, a sound, a touch, a taste, and go for it, because enjoyment is a great motivating factor. And I think sometimes when we're in the crap of it, of life, in grief, in trauma, stress, for me, enjoyment is the first thing that goes out the window. It's like, I'm not thinking about enjoying anything. I'm mad, I'm sad, I'm scared, I'm upset, but enjoyment, enjoyment, enjoyment. So what is the one thing? Is it a smell? Is it oranges? Like oranges for me do it. If I'm upset,
citrus too.
you know, orange or a tea, find one thing that you can really, really appreciate.
Yeah, that's
And
beautiful.
It doesn't have to be a big thing.
You know, I named my blog Capturing the Charmed Life.
Yeah.
And I've sometimes regretted that because it sounds too kitschy. But that's exactly for that reason, is trying to go towards the thing that brings you joy. Thank you so much for being here.
One thing. Thank you so much for having me. Had so much fun.
I feel like I just cut you off. I'd love to hear what you're about to say.
I just think that, I don't know if I'm going to remember it, but I think that the charmed life, that enjoyment is a great motivating factor. It's like, think about it. If you're going to go to the gym, it has to be a great gym. Why do I go to the gym? Because they play Zumba music and there's great women there and everyone's having a fun time and no one is judging anyone. That's why I go there. When we appreciate one enjoyment in life, it reminds us that there's hope for more enjoyment.
Beautiful. That is beautiful. Where can we find you online?
I'm here, NicolleNattrass.com. I can put it in the chat or whatever, we can put it up and they can go to my website, and I'm around town.
Do we tell you where you are?
NicolleNattrass.com. I'm on Vancouver Island, but I'm on the net, and you can get my book digitally or hard copy. You can buy my courses.
Amazon, I have the links in the in the post below. So on Amazon, where else do we find them?
Square Up Shop or through my website.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah. And I really appreciate your time, and to all the homeschooling mamas and dads out there. You are doing amazing. I see you. It's exhausting.
Yes, we feel you. We know.
We know, and good on you for doing it.
Yeah. Thank you for being here. It was such a pleasure again to chat.
Thank you, Teresa, for having me.
Yes, thanks for being here.